Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Paul Johnson. We are the Last Nighters, and you can find us on Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. Tonight is episode 130 of the show. You can find the show notes more at lastnighters.com/130, and we're going to be doing Heat tonight with our boy Mike C. He has been on many times in the past. He's done a couple of Michael Mann films already, and this will be the third in that collection. We'll have a complete rundown of all the episodes he's been on in the past at lastnighter.com/130. Also, he is a musical artist of sorts. You can find him on the SoundCloud at Mechanical Dream Revolution. And if you could, Mike, introduce yourself real quickly, and then where can people find the music that you make?
What's up, guys? It's Mike C. coming back for another podcast with the Libertarians at Actual Anarchy. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification button, etc. Oh my god, I hate YouTube. I do Mechanical Dream Revolution. It's a weird hybrid of techno, mostly trance, but a fair bit of house, and I incorporate a lot of recontextualized storytelling and news clips and shit like that. So it's kind of really interesting. I had a whole rant about it that we lost because of some technical difficulties. So maybe Dan can splice some of that shit in. like so many clips that I would integrate into melodic dark trance.
Right, with music, movies, media clips, TV shows, etc., all to tell an overarching narrative in what you call seasons. So we'll have a link to that, of course, on our show notes page. And we still are experiencing technical difficulties, so our co-host Robert is not currently available. Fuck it. We're doing it live. We're doing it live, Bill O'Reilly style. All right, so we'll start off with the Google description there, Mike. And if Robert joins us, he's welcome to have a conversation. So, Heat came out in 1995. It's a crime/crime film, according to Google. 2 hours and 52 minutes. 8.2 on that IMDb, 86% Rotten Tomatoes, and 88% of Google users gave this a thumbs up, Commodus style. And the description reads, master criminal Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro, is trying to control the rogue actions of one of his men while also planning one last big heist before retiring. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Hanna, played by Al Pacino, attempts to track down McCauley as he deals with the chaos in his own life, including the infidelity of his wife and the mental health of his stepdaughter. McCauley and Hanna discover a mutual respect even as they try to thwart each other's plans. This came out December 15th, 1995. Director, screenplay, etc., all Michael Mann. And the box office is $187.4 million on a $60 million budget. So it did actually turn a profit. And we'll go to Robert for his initial commentary and opening salvo on this one.
Well, hopefully you all can hear me. I don't know if this is actually working or not. I can actually hear you a little bit, so this is exciting.
She's clean, Bob.
So, okay, fantastic. So Heat from the man Michael Mann, the guy that also did Collateral? Some excellent films. This is like Grown-Up Cops and Robbers, and you got the acting chops of the legendary political genius Robert De Niro, and you've got Al Pacino, and Val Kilmer, all kinds of great, fantastic people at the kind of the height of their powers. And you got a really tight script and some really dynamic, kinetic action scenes from some characters that are portrayed as intelligent, which I appreciate. There's no real dummies in this movie. It's a game of cat and mouse, where you've got the cop really doing his best, who's actually a pretty smart guy, but he's got problems of his own, and he's trying to take down the criminal mastermind, and with all the powers of the major crimes force or major crimes unit in LA at his disposal. So he's got all kinds of different weapons and helicopters and multiple gang members that are all, trying to stop De Niro and his gang from robbing people. It's a lot of fun. Then they interweave some personal stories, their relationships, the relationships, the toll that the criminal lifestyle takes on their, well, both really. So yeah, it's good movie, a lot of fun. I'm excited to hear where this goes. Is anybody there?
Yeah, we're here. We can hear you. Sorry,
Okay.
I am now befuddled by technology, and so I'll just give you a little bit of feedback. I think that you're right. This is more of a nuanced take on the traditional story of criminals doing one last big score, but they're actually very specialized. Well, actually, both parties are very, very specialized, and you can see them doing this because this is the best thing that they're at, and they're really kind of not able to really do anything else because of their specialization and the path they've taken. So I think this will be a very interesting conversation, and I'll go to Mike for your response and your take on the opening, and then what makes this particular film of Michael Mann's, like, does this stand out compared to his others? And if so, for what reason?
Well, the Google description seemed a little misleading. Like, you could pretty much just be like, Heat, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are in this movie. It's about cops and robbers, and just leave it at that. You watch it if you want. But like, they mentioned a lot of stuff in the Google description that does happen in the movie, but it's not like the central focus of the film. Like, this is an interesting, yeah, like you said, take on cops and robbers, because they're essentially like soulmates. Like Achilles and Hector sort of thing, where they're sort of destined to be in conflict. Yeah, and I mean, this is obviously Michael Mann's best film, and it's a perfect film in a way. Like, there's no director's cut of this movie. He had carte blanche, and he absolutely nailed it in every aspect. I can't think of a single flaw in the film. And it's got that nice bit of melodrama I like in a Michael Mann film. So, what else did you want me to talk about?
Oh, no flaws. It's the flawless victory there.
I would call this a perfect movie. If you can point out a flaw in the movie.
All right. Well, I've got flaws, but I was going to save them for near the end. But Robert, do you have any flaws going into prior to the end? Like, let's try to stick with the timeline view of the film. I've got some issues with how it ends, the final scene and whatnot. But what's your take on Mike's position that this is a perfect 10 film?
Well, no, I was just going to mention the final scene. So I let me think about this for a minute. Yeah, talk amongst yourselves while I think of a flaw, because yeah, no, it is difficult. Yeah, no, seriously, talk amongst yourselves. Come on.
All right. Well, I think that there's a lot of build up and lead up, and I do like that they develop the characters a fair amount, and that the one mistake that De Niro makes, that Neil makes, in not offing what's crazy dude's name, Weingard, something like that.
He didn't. He missed the opportunity, though. He didn't choose to not do that.
No, he had him down and he was about to shoot him, but then a cop rolled by.
Yeah.
And somehow he escapes in the midst of this. And so that comes back to bite him. Like, had that.
Yeah. So you're touching on like the nature of this movie, where it's like you said, it's got a lot of good character development. It's very realistic characters, and they all seem very human. And simultaneously, there's this sort of Shakespearean or Greek drama to it, or melodrama, where destiny is kind of fucking with these characters and pushing them towards each other and pushing them towards the conflict that they end up in eventually.
Yeah, and it's Wayne Grove that's the key.
Yeah.
What would you call that? He's kind of the wrench. He's the monkey in the wrench, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really a foil. I mean, he sort of is, in the sense that he points out, like, De Niro's quality as a criminal. That De Niro has a code, and Wayne Grove is just seeking other people to consume for their energy and their power, right? Like, that's why he murders that hooker, because he doesn't he's broken and he can only feel powerful or safe or whatever. He's afraid of whatever by hurting others needlessly. Whereas whereas De Niro just wants to take other people's shit, and he really does not want to cause needless suffering.
Right, yeah, he's got a ruthless efficiency to him.
Yeah.
And if he's presented in a situation where he needs to make a choice, even a dire choice, he'll do it without hesitation. And one of the more infamous things related to this film is that he says, well, you need to be able to walk away from something within 30 seconds to be able to be doing the lifestyle that he's doing. And Wayne Grove, you're right, he is a crazy guy who just wants to administer pain to complete him or whatever, like it's his
to complete him, to empower him. So he's weak. He's essentially a weak person, and then Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are incredibly dominant, strong people. They're like two kings.
But Wayne Grove is what puts De Niro in the position, even during that initial heist where they do the armored vehicle.
He's the entire exigence. Sorry.
Yeah, the armored car robbery where he gets trigger happy and shoots that first security guard.
Yep, they might have had less heat on them had they not murdered 3 people in the process of taking the bonds.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then in not being able to dispatch of Wayne Grove, then we get the whole plot to it's a little bit convoluted, but how they eventually get to Wayne Grove to get the plot of where they're going to strike next and how to take down Neil's gang. It's kind of an interesting series of events because you have Val Kilmer's wife cheating on him because she's not being fulfilled. She's not happy with how he's mismanaging.
No, because he's not disciplined.
Right. He doesn't have the discipline that De Niro has. He has the efficiency of doing the work. He's very good at doing the job. But then whenever he gets any of the spoils, he ends up blowing them in a gambling, sports book gambling.
Yeah. So that's another central theme. It's about self-discipline and like dominance as a man. This is an extremely masculine film, which you do not see anymore. But I don't even think you saw it much in the 90s. This kind of like you got the hyper masculine shit with, Schwarzenegger, Schwarza N-word, shooting a fucking, M60 into 50 brown people in Commando or whatever. But you didn't get like that level of dominance in situations in the workplace, between Al Pacino and De Niro, right? Those are incredibly disciplined men, and it talks a lot about in the film about Buddy has an addiction, right? He has an addiction to gambling, so he can't maintain his family life. So De Niro steps in and says, "Look, I'm going to lock this down." When he finds her cheating on him. I'm assuming the people that are listening to this have watched the movie. If you haven't, stop listening to this right now and watch this movie twice, and then come back. Right, or don't come back. It's really important you watch this movie. It's a perfect film. Anyway, so De Niro
all the time on the show, by the way. It's always spoilers.
Yeah. So De Niro confronts the wife of Val Kilmer, and he says, "Look, I understand what's going on. I am going to lock him down, and you're going to give him one more chance, and that's all there is to it, because he's just calling the shots." And yeah, it's like a really interesting, I don't know how to describe it. He's an excellent boss. He's an excellent leader, right? And so is Al Pacino, and they're at odds with each other. And a lot of the characters beneath those two sort of patriarchs are following them for a reason. And they're not like Tom Sizemore needs that juice as well. He's got an addiction.
Yeah,
he should get out. There's no reason. Yeah, he has to. He needs the relief of action, And the old man they get the money from that does his laundering and stuff, right? Is kind of like this wise old man that's like, less and less heat, right? And ultimately that guy's even cooler than Robert De Niro, who can't let go of certain things. He has to put himself in harm's way to adhere to his own code, where I think he honestly personally feels responsible for Wayne Grove's actions, and he feels responsible for taking this person out of the equation. because like he's almost a cop between those two. He's the authority between those two. So a lot of this movie is about authority, dominance, self-discipline, and the code you sort of live by, right? So
yeah, I think you've got a lot of good points there, because De Niro is very much a stringent person to adhere to his own code, and he does take on that. I don't know if responsibility is the right word, but he feels like it's his fault that Waingrove was able to survive and then screw him, and that his buddies got shot as a result of that failure on his part, or perceived failure on his part.
Yeah.
And so even once he was home free on escaping, he had the money, he had the girl, he had the out plan, and he's like trying to make this decision while he's driving down the highway. He's driving to freedom. And I actually had a similar decision. It's weird to say this is a similar decision, but my wife and I, she was my girlfriend at the time. We went down to California from near Seattle for a vacation, and we went to Yosemite and camped down there. Meanwhile, my grandfather, who was like 93 at the time, he was like on his last week or two, and I knew that. And I went and saw him before we left. And then we drove down, camped, and then we were driving back through San Francisco, and I started getting calls from my family saying he's in hospice, things are not looking good, and if you want to see him, you better do it right now. And we were driving up from San Francisco along the 101, which is the coastline, and we were going to camp on the Oregon coast, 3 different spots on 3 different nights, working our way back home. And I knew that for about an hour, we knew we were about an hour away from making this turn back towards I-5 and just driving straight through the night to get back to where my grandfather was, or continuing along the coast and camping. And I actually thought about it for that entire hour. And the off-ramp was right there, and I was like trying to decide if I'm going to do it or not. And at the last possible moment, just like De Niro in this, I turned and drove all night to go and see him. And so that's the only thing that's similar, is that in making that decision. Now that decision is what ended up screwing De Niro, because he was home free, but because he was sticking to his own code and taking that responsibility and the consequences of his failure, he wanted to take care of Waingrove. He wanted to get him out of the picture as like administering justice or vengeance against him, because he didn't want to have to hold a grudge. He wanted to exact it.
Essentially, he became the cop between the two of them, the policeman, and yeah, it is really interesting, because like I guess the movie kind of says what the name of the movie, the title probably gives us a clue as to what the themes are, right? With like bringing heat down on yourself, what you do to incur the wrath of others and society. So De Niro is like, I'm going to be a criminal, but I'm going to do it in a way that is as absolutely safe as possible, bringing like the least amount of heat down on myself, right? And Waingrove brought the heat of De Niro down on him, essentially, right?
Right, for bringing the heat of
and then
the police upon him.
Fishner, is it William Fishner, the guy that's in every science fiction movie? That guy brought heat down on him as well, right?
Right, yeah, and he paid him back dearly.
And he had no, like, he's just judge, jury executioner. And Al Pacino wish he had that kind of freedom.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, I wanted to go back to just the series of events that allowed Waingrove to even put De Niro and his team in harm's way, because as we talked about, Val Kilmer's wife in the movie, Chris, his name's Chris, right? She's unhappy, so she's cheating on him with Hank Azaria from The Simpsons. And
because she's got a great ass.
A great ass. That's right. You can take Al Pacino in any movie, and he's like the same guy. I don't. Well, no,
so he's very reserved in this movie. He really downplays a lot of shit. He has a couple moments that are Al Pacino, and that's one of them. He or another one is when he thinks Buddy's gotten away. He goes like, "Bye-bye, motherfucker," whatever. And he kind of gives himself a little bit of, right? And Michael Mann had that leash, but for the most part, like, he was this is a different kind of Al Pacino than most of his films, right? This is him really acting.
I don't
They're
know.
not just paying him to.
8 or 9 of those outbursts.
Yeah, no, there are a few, but it's like he also there's a lot of really subtle moments, like non-Meryl Streep kind of moments, where you're seeing like just a very simple inflection in his face, and he's saying things very softly. So I really I don't know, man. Like Michael Mann must just be an exceptional director because he gets the most out of his actors, if you've noticed.
He does seem to push them to a place where they find something that makes it stand out from most. And I'm actually surprised, like we did Last of the Mohicans the last time you were on, that Daniel Day-Lewis didn't win Best Actor.
What was he up against?
I know we talked about it during that episode, but I don't recall who it was. But,
something Weinstein was running.
Probably.
Yeah, that guy can out Spielberg the Spielbergs, outberg the Bergs.
Right. So I just want to throw. So Robert is reconnected, and he wrote in a chat, De Niro failed to ease his love interest into his crazy. He committed the too much too soon fallacy.
Fuck that, man. Pull the trigger if you know.
All right, and
just love that. They love obsessive guys. No, but they do actually like. That's I thought it was very romantic because he sort of stuck his toe in. Just be like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like to like make love once in a while, or meet somebody and like get to know them instead of just paying somebody to have sex with me, you know. And then he probably thought that he wasn't going to go back, and then he did go back.
Right, but then he did stick to his code, because when the Waingrove is taken care of and he's escaping the hotel, he's looking right at her and he sees Pacino coming at him, and he's like making that decision in that moment. So in a way, like even having Edie be in the picture at all is him sort of bending his own rule.
Yeah, he was cheating because instead of like he should have waited till he was retired to worry about that. But again, sometimes you find somebody that sort of makes you compromise, and that's probably not a bad thing.
Right, and he also thought that this was his one last big score, and that he was on the precipice of retiring, and that he found her at the time, and perhaps that was like a fate or something like that's like, oh, this must be like for the best because I found her just as I'm about to do this retire thing.
Yeah, I do find that like I've had a couple of good relationships that just kind of came out of the blue, right? Like I'm male, so I'm not always looking for commitment, and you end up liking somebody more than you thought you would. That's the current situation I'm in. I was planning to be single, and it's going pretty strong. So, I mean, I get it. I just, like I don't know. I feel like they covered enough ground within the development of that relationship where he's like, yeah, you know what? It is okay to have attachment, and I am getting out. So it is a flaw because what he should have done is like disconnected from that until he was truly out. So that is like him compromising, but.
Right. Yeah, I could totally have seen him like pulling off the score, escaping to that Fiji island or wherever he was going to end up, and then sending for her. Being like, "Hey, I'm on my business trip, and I'm going to stay here. You should come down and join me."
Yeah, and then just do it the normal way. But with maybe in a way he needed to be honest. Maybe he needed to reveal that this was who he was, and that he was 100% committed to the relationship, and he wanted somebody that was as committed as him. I mean, you don't often get that out of modern relationships, that kind of like honesty. So
yeah, perhaps you might be giving us a stretch goal here on your Indiegogo campaign there, bud. But
fair enough.
One other thing that Robert mentioned, and unfortunately we're just going to get probably text comments from Robert as his main contribution on this episode. But another topic of discussion is how Tone Loc rats out his competition to the authorities.
Okay. We're getting into libertarian shit now.
Yeah, but not out of virtue, but out of a protectionism, which you see this all the time in legislation or departments that are put up with experts in the field drafting the rules and regulations that apply to everyone, thus to provide a protective barrier for the entrenched interest and keep upstarts out.
Yeah. So that's our primary criticism of government interference in marketplaces and the authority of government is essentially you by decree justify tyranny, like the tyranny of the exact thing that these like fucking commies are always complaining about is true. Like these corporations are monolithic and juggernauts, like unstoppable. They completely dominate marketplaces, and it's only because they're able to lobby for the laws they want. And to an extent, like I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA or the government specifically, was an angel investor in like Google or Amazon. Like I don't know to what extent, but we're coming out of this lockdown and like Jeff Bezos is the person to most profit from this tyranny. Mom and pop businesses are going out of business, and everybody's buying shit on Amazon. Apparently, Amazon packages don't harbor the virus or something.
Yeah, it's hard to get a straight story out of the media these days.
Well, I know that if you go to Walmart and Amazon, that's fine, and if you go to like a local business, that they have more to worry about. So I mean, it just seems pretty obvious to me that they're fisting us.
Well, there you go, applying logic again, Mike.
Anyway, so yeah, that's sort of like the microcosm of that is a drug dealer getting his drug dealer competition taken off the street, right, by the cops in exchange for information. So it sort of works both ways, because a CI, a confidential informant, is somebody that gives information to the cops, but like that information is very likely to benefit whatever he's doing that's unscrupulous or illegal.
Right. So it's sort of weaponizing the law enforcement to their benefit.
It's weaponizing the organizational crime as well. Like it's trying, I don't know. I guess there's a benefit to that, is that the crime is going to be only organized, which is more structured, a little less psychopathic, but still, like, you're really fucking with the marketplace.
Right. Now, I want to go back to Waingrove and the path that leads to Waingrove being able to rat out Neil's gang, because they go through Chris's wife, who's cheating on him with Hank Azaria, who's this liquor sales guy from Las Vegas. And the police become aware of this and go to Las Vegas, rough him up, even though they're not in his jurisdiction or whatever, and he even calls him out on this. But then they threaten him with smuggling cigarettes from North Carolina to New Jersey years in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of keeping records, right?
Right, and it's a totally like a bullshit law that they're using just as leverage to lean on him and threaten him with dire repercussions if he doesn't cooperate with them in this particular investigation to get dirt on Chris and Neil and the rest of the gang. And it's just kind of like, it's one of those things where, is it an Ayn Rand quote where it's the more laws there are, the more lawlessness there is? Or the more laws, the more corrupt a government is, and that I think that was like Aristotle or Aristophanes. Right, and then there's also the more laws there are, the more criminals there are, and basically you just get enough legalized criminality, or you define criminality in such a way to where nearly anything can be viewed as illegal or unlawful. Then you have dirt and leverage on everybody.
Yeah, and you're talking about totalitarianism and the vector towards totalitarian systems, right?
Right, and so we just see an example of that in this film, and that's how they get Hank Azaria to cooperate with them.
Yeah, well, so to back away from that a little bit, I do like that this movie's about bank robberies and diamond heists and people that are breaking a non-aggression principle overtly, as opposed to like this era, of filmmaking. It was usually like anti-drug, right? Because of the whole Bush anti-drug thing. So you get Mel Gibson and Danny Glover killing fucking coke dealers, like murdering people for for buying Coke from them after they tried to make the purchase. Like that just, that was like the sort of the baseline. So what I do like about this movie is that it's easier to deal with than something like Miami Vice, where they're going up against drug importers, because none of that would be a problem if you just, other problems would occur, but the level of psychotic behavior and psychopathic behavior that comes out of illicit substances is at least in part due to its prohibition. I think we know that from alcohol prohibition and the mob and all that shit. So it's nice. It's nice that there's an imperative that is something I can get behind between the cop and the robber. So like, I don't think that Al Pacino is wrong to have the career he has, because he's trying to stop murderers and rapists and people that physically take other people's stuff, right? Just, as a sort of like a pragmatic kind of look at it, is,
Right, and in an Ancapistan scenario, his position would probably still exist, but not as a monopoly, but as more of like a competitive insurance model, security service provider, there to prevent and thwart these aggressions against other people and their property.
Pacino could have killed that girl, but obviously not the moral actor in this scene. What is that?
I think he's talking about when Tom Sizemore gets shot by Pacino.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I like about this. Yeah, okay. So that's what I like about this movie, that a lot of people make very, very cold, calculated, and harsh decisions, and it's more about authority at the micro level at the individual, and the dominance of like one man over other men, which is kind of interesting. And yeah, like if Al Pacino had missed that shot, like I don't know if cops can be fired, if that's even a thing, but that would have been wrong, right? But he took that shot because he knew the man that he was dealing with. So he took the shot, because like Sizemore probably would have not gone down without a fight. You know what I mean? Like he was not in a sane state, and he needed to be put down. So.
Right, and Sizemore, as depicted in the film, he was running from a couple of cops from the other direction, so he wasn't as concerned about what was behind him until he turned around and he saw Pacino trained on him, and his eyes widened. Pacino had time to take that shot, so I'm not too. It didn't surprise me that Pacino takes that shot, and I didn't think the girl was at undue risk, especially given that Pacino is very proficient at what he does.
No, if you take a kid hostage, I think you should be shot. So I'm not really interested in that guy going to trial in any version of a society.
Right. Now, there's the whole, innocent until proven guilty, but he's there in the midst of the act, taking a child as a hostage. So, you're there viewing it happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing about justice, right? Like, justice is it's so inefficient, it's almost a lost cause, because the best thing to do is prohibit violations on the fly when it happens. Like
the immediate
stop people from stealing from you, murder people trying to aggress upon you, right? Like these are ways to solve the aggression in our society and people that don't want to behave. The endless appeal that needs to happen in any kind of judicial system to make it fair is, it's not super efficient, is all I'm saying. Like it takes a lot of our resources rather than deferring or decentralizing the responsibility to the individual. And you're probably behind that concept, the decentralization and the minority one. Sorry guys, good luck. I like all these points. If you can hear us, I am going to address all these points. There's a lot of really good things that he's saying in the chat.
Okay, and I can speak for Robert. I can play the role of Robert tonight as well. So we're responding to a comment that Robert has written to us in a text-based format because his connection is not strong tonight on whether Pacino could have killed the girl that Sizemore had taken hostage. But obviously, Pacino is not the moral actor in that scenario because Sizemore was the one who committed the aggression, and Pacino was trying to mitigate it. save the girl's life if possible. And so he took Sizemore down. Do you think that he had any duty to not shoot and find a alternative, more peaceful resolution? And I got to say, in that moment, I don't think there really was.
No, it escalated way too far. Like, here's the thing: is they went to arrest them, and Chris opened fire immediately because that was their methodology. They're not interested in going to jail. They're not interested in negotiation. They're stealing some shit, and if you get in their way, they'll kill you.
Right, and we saw that with the very first heist, where as soon as Waingrove makes his aggressive move to satisfy his evil instinct, the rest of them can join in and shoot the witnesses because, well, now you've already committed murder on one person. You can't leave a witness at this point. And so we see that again at the bank heist, where as soon as Chris realizes that they're caught, basically, he goes into defensive/aggressive mode almost immediately. And another point that Robert was making right before this was also related to the bank robbery, where they say, don't be a hero. Your money is insured by the federal government. And Robert asks, does the government security, does that encourage the crime, or is it just a convenient excuse to not feel bad about it for De Niro? And I'll add a corollary to that, and I'll address it to you, Mike. The other heist that they did was for the security, or it was a security or like a stock certificate or whatever for like 1.2 million that the William Fichtner character had insured. And so they justified it to themselves that, well, he's going to be made whole as a result of this anyway. And John Voight's character is like, why not sell it to him at a discount, because he's going to be made whole, and then also buy it back from us at a discount, and thus clear 40 or 60% on top of being made whole. So both of those situations incentivize the crime to happen in the first place, or make it easier for the crime to happen, because any moral fortitude that might prevent the criminal from doing that said behavior is like, well, it's insured anyway. Sort of like how we saw with the excuses for the peaceful protests burning down buildings, or I'll rephrase it. There were peaceful protests, and then there were people co-opting that and rioting and burning down buildings. And then the excuses were, well, they're insured anyway.
Well, there's three factors in the so-called protests. There's protests, there's riots, and there's looting. And those are, I think, three different categories.
Right. And we saw a variety of all three. Yep. But it seemed as if the excuse to make it okay was, well, they're insured anyway.
Yeah, so I don't think that De Niro is interested in justifying his behavior. I think that he does what he can do within a system that allows him to get away with stuff. So I think that it's more about like self-actualization and the boundaries by which you will be stopped by other people's aggression. So he's a burglar and he's a bank robber. So he's interested in less confrontational ways to take other people's shit. And I don't think I don't think it's justified in his mind, but he knows that since it's insured, the security for those items will be less.
Right.
So if you do a cost-benefit analysis of that, I only have to overpower 3 guards in a truck to get these bonds, because the person it's not gold, it's not cash, right? It's insured. So these things are like, I don't know how to say this. Losing my train of thought. But basically, because they are protected, the physical protection of them doesn't really need to be what it would be, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Because you're going to get the money back. So there's no point, like, you don't really need more than 3 security guards. If you could steal from people in that way, that much money, and actually steal it, and that person would have no recourse, there would be a lot more protection. There'd be a machine gun on top of the truck. There'd be, there'd be more than pistols inside the truck.
Right, but the insurance company would have had the incentive to have that additional security, so they don't have to make that payout. So, and that's how a security based on insurance model would work. In that
but insurance is kind of a scam, right?
Well, yeah, in today's paradigm, of course, but we're talking about in the concept being applied to a free society, where the insurance companies that would be at risk of making the payouts would be the ones incentivized to provide the things to make that event less likely to occur.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and then I think that De Niro uses it during the bank heist, mostly for the crowd control component of it, where people are going to see the money being taken, but he says, hey, you don't need to be a hero because you're going to be made whole. You're not losing a thing. So you don't need to risk your life to protect something that you're going to get back anyway.
Yeah. And they weren't interested in robbing the citizens, the civilians inside the situation. There's another thing. They kind of like the cops and robbers see the cops and robbers as two like sort of militaries, and there's civilians within that, and they sort of know that civilians are sort of off limits, but also one side is a little less worried about them than the other. But and ultimately, since Al Pacino is willing to take that shot, that you do what you have to do. They're just kind of in the way. So that's kind of interesting to me.
Right. All right. So the next topic that Robert has brought up is that the cops drive their cars like they're rental cars. Why not? It's not their property, nor do they have to pay for the maintenance or the fuel. And yeah, so Pacino, when he's in a bad mood, he drives his car super fast and recklessly and roughly, hard stops and hard accelerations.
Yeah, I mean, I've used company trucks before, though. In
a similar fashion.
Yeah, sometimes I'd stay in second. I'd move in second on a left-hand turn in an intersection, fuck up the clutch a bit. You know what I mean? Like, it's a company truck, right? And you may not be super happy. I think that the cops not in the States get a little bit better training and a bit better money. So there might be a certain level of being disgruntled and not giving a shit about certain things. I guess Al Pacino's making a bit more money. He's got some nice suits. But again, it's just like, yeah, like if any company gives you something like a rental and you're not really that accountable for it, then you're not going to be as nice as you could. But again, that's like a benefit. That's the prerogative of the people employing you.
And it's not necessarily like even a fully conscious decision that you're making. It's because you know that it's not your own personal property, that if something happens to it, you're the one who's on the hook to pay for it or repair it. Of course, you're going to be incentivized, knowingly or wittingly or not, to take better care of things that you own and are responsible for the consequences of things that happen to them. And it's just the nature of ownership and having stake in something. So I think that was a good point that Robert brought up.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think what irks him, if I can speak for him, but since he's not here, is that since they're government officials, then they should have that it's a little more annoying. Like, if a mailman doesn't use this stuff that's free or given to him freely, and that he's not accountable for properly, then it's a little more irksome than if a contractor uses a company truck in a way that, you would also criticize him for.
Right. Yeah, there's certainly levels, Gary. There's levels. Because also the private business, there is still some incentive to have things...
Sorry, I'm sorry, I should have muted myself. You can edit that out.
You got to open that whiskey there, bud. All right. So even the private company, as an employee of that private company, there is somewhat more of an incentive to at least take care of the equipment a little bit more so than in a government situation. So it's like a matter of degree. But if you own it personally, then there's the highest amount of incentive to take care of something. And then when it's privately owned, but company or whatever, you still have an incentive to have it be in working order because you still wish to be employed. You still wish for the company to like be profitable and still maintain you having a job. But when it comes to the bureaucratic process, you're actually incentivized to waste and
to an extent
for newer, more equipment, bigger budgets, more staffing, and all the rest.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like I said, it's a continuum of no one would dispute that your own property is something you cherish more than somebody else's property that you're borrowing. Except maybe the perfect Soviet man that they were trying to create,
New kind yeah, that didn't work.
Just like I said, I would put this in the same category as a company giving you, a timeshare or a public washroom to use within the building that you're working in. It's just an extension of that taken to, a bit more of an extreme because of the, justifiable wear and tear you can put on a vehicle, and you can just not give a shit and you can be a bit more angry. Like I said, I just view it as a benefit. And yeah, like basically what we're discussing is not liking the cops as a company. We don't think that they're run very well. And we think that the reason they're not run very well is because they're monopoly and that there's no,
no alternative.
There's no alternative. There is an alternative. There's private security. And despite the cops being a free service that is paid for through, collected resources by force, it is a standardized service that's given to everyone, in a way that we have we have the right to access to this, and it's so great that other people buy private security regardless of this free service.
Right, and I have a great article by Murray Rothbard that talks about the provision of security services in this socialized method and how there is no equality of service, and that a private process would be far more efficient, a competitive process that has economic calculation and incentive to improve service, lower costs, and all the rest. So I'll post that on our show notes page, lastmarriage.com/130. The next item up for bid from Robert is, why don't the cops recognize Chris? So I guess we're getting into flaws now, and have a photo or description of him. They rely on the wife to say whether it's him or not. Are they retarded? The one that knows what he looks like is the one that doesn't look. This seems to be a mistake. You would think that the every officer involved in this operation would be aware of what all the parties look like.
Okay, so we're going to criticize their lackadaisical approach to a situation that may go on for 12 hours, I guess. So, like, you would prefer something a little more Gestapo-like, where they're really closing down the roads and they're making sure. And they did stop. The cop that stopped him did look him over, and he had a false identification. And maybe they didn't have enough information on him. I can't remember.
They did do surveillance above the restaurant. Remember, they were up in the.
That's true.
Yeah, whatever the writing was up there, but they were taking photos of all the participants. They knew who these people were. So one would think that if they're going to stake out the wife's apartment and use her as bait, that they would be in a position to be able to positively identify that person, especially if they're going to stop them and check them over.
Yeah, so that's fair.
Did seem to be a little bit of a loose.
Getting close to a plot hole. All right. Well, I mean, divine intervention. The cop that stopped him just didn't recognize him for some reason. Yeah, you're right. That is kind of a.
It turns out that Chris is the big winner in this whole thing. He gets away, right?
Yeah, but does he? I mean, he lost his wife and kids ultimately because he left the system that was trying to keep him straight.
Well, he lost them in the moment. But similar to how we were saying, De Niro should have retired after the job to the South Pacific Island and then sent back for Edie, or wrote her a letter and said, "Hey, let's reconnect." Chris, same thing, somehow, some way.
Without the dominant force in his life of De Niro, he would not be able to have self-control. Is the issue? Okay. Unless this trauma was enough to push him to the light side.
Just like when Robin Williams' character in Mrs. Doubtfire ends up in a divorce situation where he now has to like confront these failings that he's had that made the marriage unhappy. And so he actually did have to double down and improve his abilities and his skill set and become a better father to those kids.
Yeah, no, I like recently, I've been with a girl for about 18 months, and we hit kind of like a rock bottom and hit like, well, we got to the foundation to restructure the foundation, I'll just say. And some of that involved me looking at my own behavior and changing. So it did require, again, it's incentives though, right? So this sort of falls in line with your, though I wouldn't try to apply the Stefan Molyneux libertarianism to relationship theory. He's a little autistic about that, but in short, it does require a bit of pushback sometimes. So, you know, and life will give you that, and your relationship will give you that. And in the case of De Niro and Pacino, they give each other that because they are essentially soulmates.
Yeah, and we see that played out in one of the great scenes in this is the restaurant scene, where, I mean, if you want a master class on acting, I mean, you've got those two sitting there sizing each other up, because exposing their soulmate connectedness, like
like in the sense of Achilles and Hector, right, where they were destined to, one of them had to die,
right? But they're also equals, like they're both equally
absolutely
equally skilled, and one of them will come out on top. Well, there can be only one, Highlander style, but it's a great scene, and I think that not only do you have great actors, but you have a great director in Michael Mann creating this. I kind of want to get to the end scene comment that De Niro is doing. I'm not sure what you want to do for time here, but well, I want to lead up to it a little bit, because De Niro does do the pull off of the highway to go and take care of Waingrove, because he needs to have that vengeance for what he's done against them.
Is it vengeance? Because it feels like it's this beautiful discussion about what vengeance and what justice are and why they're not really different than each other. You know, like RoboCop shows up, kicks the door in, and then starts murdering people, and the shiny suit he's wearing is called justice, when he's just murdering a bunch of factory workers, right?
Yeah, I mean, in this, I mean, he's got that code. He's been violated. He lost his friends as a result of what Waingrove has done.
But more than that, sorry.
He's got a thing he's got to do. He has this drive to take care of it. He can't let this go.
What's interesting is the coalescence between this idea of revenge and this idea of like removing a cancer, removing an element that needs to be extracted, because like that was a bad man that shouldn't be alive. Right, like, there was really no other recourse, and the law wasn't going to do it because the law was fucking protecting him.
Right, but we know as an audience way more than even De Niro.
Yes. His character reminds me of the sheriff in Natural Born Killers that has to kill that hooker to empower himself to go after the Woody Harrelson and what's her name? Crazy bitch.
Juliette Lewis?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one in a long time. That's probably...
Well, anyway, there's a scene, it's very similar to the way Waingrove feels the need to kill this hooker, right? Like, he kills like a fucking underage girl because he needs to pick on weak things and take their energy to feel whole or whatever. It makes him stronger. So he's like this sort of devil-worshipping fucking, or like a demon, essentially, that's on the earth that needs to be, you know, extracted. So what's interesting is how the heat that he put on himself for the vengeance of De Niro it coalesces with his need to be removed from society. That's interesting to me. It's because like the two ideas are the same, because this is what Michael Mann does. He doesn't make any moral judgments. He just says like, this is what happened when people do things. It's like when they do stuff to each other, there's results, and these are the results, and the results are like these sometimes metaphysical results.
Yeah, and Waingrove was already dead in De Niro's mind, or Neil's mind. Like, he'd already made the decision to kill him for botching the original job.
Yeah, well, not even botching it, for just being... Yeah, okay, so sorry, just to belabor my point, is that botching the job was synonymous with being a bad person.
Right.
Because the reason he botched the job is because he's a piece of shit that wanted to kill somebody else for virtually no reason.
Right. So maybe I walk back my original that De Niro didn't know enough about the guy. He knew enough to know that he's a bad dude.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes you know that at a glance, right?
Yeah, like dogs can like sense if somebody's good or bad, and be all uncomfortable and growling around them. But let's get to after he kills Waingrove. I mean, he handles it really well in causing all this confusion in the hotel. Like he
should have, like, that's like a Hitman level, the game Hitman. Like he's just like does everything.
Right, because he knew it was staked out. As soon as he got into that hotel and took on the security guard uniform or whatever it was, the staff uniform, and he saw behind the front desk that a guy had a shotgun, he knew that Waingrove was bait and that this was a trap. And yet he proceeded. Like if I were Neil in that situation, I'd be like, okay, I came here to take care of this situation, but obviously it's a trap and I'm going to walk away because I can still get away scot-free at this point.
He has a very analytical mind, and he's able to make very good decisions without a lot of information. Like
right.
Like he just, because like a lot of people are kind of NPCs, right? So you just kind of you look at the systems. He's like Neo. He just saw the Matrix.
Yeah, he knew how to bend around the bullets in that hotel.
Yeah, no, he saw exactly how he could do it, and he probably, I don't know, he's that kind of character. And there are people like that are just smarter. It's kind of annoying when you meet them and they're like completely dominate you. But at the same time, you're like, it's fine.
Yeah, well,
like I'd push a broom in a battery factory for Elon Musk, right? I wouldn't have an issue with that.
Right, yeah, because I can see the Neil character and how he's portrayed as being. It's funny you mentioned Elon Musk because in my notes I said Neil is so highly specialized in what he does. He's highly intelligent and proficient. However, if legal protectionism, impediments, and other state-induced sanctioned hurdles did not stand in his way, I think that he would be able to hone those skills into something that provides tremendous value for others and makes him very well off in the process, a la Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, or Elon Musk.
But would he still want to just steal other people's shit?
Well, I think in an Ankapistani society, he wouldn't.
The risk reward wouldn't be the same,
right?
Probably, because like a bank, it doesn't have the same security as a bank in your roadless utopia.
That's right. Where we're going, we don't need roads. Now let's get into right after he takes out Waingrove and he walks away from Edie. He does that, 30 seconds to walk away. I think that he has enough distance between him and Pacino to get away, because how the hell can Pacino know where he's going and be able to follow him across the tarmac at the airport? How convenient that the hotel is right next to the airport, by the way.
Okay. In a video game, an AI has to, like in a first-person shooter video game, the AI assesses cover, and then it'll look for you and stuff. And like a very simple program can figure that out, right? And so a human being can do calculations that are much better than that kind of programming. So Al Pacino presumably surveyed the landscape and went, well, if I was doing this, I would do that. And Robert De Niro is very, very similar to me, so I'll calibrate my thinking to what De Niro would do. Neil and Vincent.
Right. Now, I find it very convenient for a plot device for this hotel to be right next to the airport, especially when he has to turn off the highway so abruptly to go and do this hit. If he's already practically at the airport where he can run from the hotel to the airport.
Yeah, I mean, airports are big. He needed to go to the charter area to get a charter flight that would look more like cargo. So I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of land, and a hotel being by an airport isn't difficult for me to imagine.
Right. Yeah, that part's not too crazy, but I just find it a little bit convenient. And I thought that he had enough distance between him and Pacino to be able to have eluded him. Now, that doesn't even get into the fact that once we get onto the airport and he gets down off of the runway portion and is down by those multicolored buildings, the orange and the white blocked painting. I'm not sure what that's called, but you see it around airports all the time. You would think that De Niro would be in the advantageous position because he's in the entrenched. He's in the, what do you call that? He's the Alamo versus the invader coming in trying to search for him. So all he needs to do is stake out a position where he has line of sight to the entry point, and then he wins the engagement 9 times out of 10. For whatever reason, obviously because it's a movie and he can't win, we see him cowering away, putting himself in losing sight of his of Pacino coming after him.
He was outgunned.
Right, and we get the plot device of the airplane coming in and the lights lighting up and the shadow revealing his position, even though he's already pointed his firearm at Pacino. Somehow, Pacino gets off the 3 shots across the chest.
Okay, so the reason he was retreating was because Pacino had a shotgun and he had a pistol. So he was outgunned and he needed a better position. So he did try to stake out a good position. And then he said, okay, these lights are going to come on and they're going to blind Pacino. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step out and I'm going to take a shot. When these lights blind him, I'll have the sun on my back, right? And then the shadow gave his position away. So the very thing that he was trying to use as an advantage against Pacino was in fact the thing that Pacino used that triggered, it gave his position away.
So in watching this as an audience member, do you think the intention of Michael Mann was to telegraph that Neil is going to utilize those lights to his advantage and it backfires?
Yes, that's exactly what he said in the director's commentary.
Okay, well, I should have listened to the director's commentary. However, the film is so long, it took me 3 nights to watch it and no director's commentary.
Fair enough.
I will add, though, that in watching a film like this, and apparently this is a thing related to streaming services, Amazon Prime was super blocky, especially in the scene that is displayed behind me in the YouTube video version of this show. This is Neil's apartment overlooking the water, and it's a very dark scene. We see Michael Mann, I guess, preparing for how he shot Collateral, mostly at night, using a lot of dark background. But it's super blocky and choppy in Amazon Prime. But when I played it in Vudu, it was very, very well defined, high def, and worked really well. So if there's a comparison between the 2 streaming services, I think that Amazon Prime cut the bit rate down to make it less pleasant to watch, and then I switched over to Vudu.
Yeah, it sounds like something that, Amazon would do. I don't know if they're super interested in goodwill. They've got market control. It's kind of like Apple fucks you. If you've got Apple products, that they're just constantly kind of like a mosquito trying to get, you need more storage, shit like that. Would you, do you want to buy this, or would you rather subscribe indefinitely to your own life?
All right.
I have a Blu-ray of this movie.
Okay.
On physical media. I'm currently I'm good enough at drywall and painting that I can create storage areas in my walls for when the government outlaws art, physical copies of art. Or Disney. Did I say the government? I meant when Disney buys Heat and it outlaws me owning a DVD of it or a Blu-ray, then I've got a place in my wall. I'm going to hide it away. Physical media, man. Physical media. And just get you can get a DVD or Blu-ray player for $30.
Yeah, it seems like it is getting to that point. There's been a plethora of things being altered or removed altogether recently, past episodes of certain TV shows. One of the greatest of the Faulty Towers episodes has been removed.
Oh, is it where he's goose stepping?
Yeah.
Really?
And then, yeah, I believe so. And then 30 Rock.
You can't even make fun of Nazis anymore?
No, you can't depict them in any way, shape, or form.
Jesus.
30 Rock also had similar scenes cut. The Simpsons had scenes altered. I think Disney walked those back, though.
So is this Disney doing all of this?
No, it's not just Disney. It's other. It's wokeism erasing not only history but also cultural context.
Yeah,
it's really bizarre.
It's not. It's not if you look at the whole picture, right? Because we've been marching towards this for some time.
Right, but I just can't wrap my hand around how this helps anything.
Well, it helps the people that want to make us slaves.
I'm surprised they could be so overt about it.
Well, I mean, they came in like, with one pinky finger. It wasn't like a big, we didn't start with this. The boiling frog is maybe a little less offensive as a metaphor, but
was the toe in the door?
Yeah, thin edge of the wedge. The camel in the tent.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, so, let's go back to the movie for a moment, because we can wind this down and we can continue on Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon supporters. Hit us up at lastnighters.com/Patreon. Just like our recent friend Chase has become a new patron, so I am now rolling the Patreon patrons down below at the bottom of the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. By the way, do subscribe to us on YouTube. Look for The Last Nighters on YouTube, and you. I cut off the N on Patreon, so it's lastnighters.com/Patreon, of course. Patreon. I think maybe I'll have a competitive service to Patreon that's costs less, has better beans. It'll be a spite site.
So new. I don't know if it's got back up yet, but new Project 2 by the Dick Masterson, the Dick Show. He's a libertarian, and he basically wanted to create a exchange point that was protected, that had First Amendment protections, and he just lost his bank support, which is very sad, because he was like, until the banks or the government physically stop me from doing this, I will let anything on my platform, right? As long as you're not fucking around with fraud. So that was kind of sad, because Patreon obviously has a political bias, right?
It certainly seems like that's a plausible explanation, yes.
Yeah, so there's a medium of exchange. I mean, I don't fault you for using it, because there aren't a lot of options, but it is interesting. So you talk about this, how they're getting away with this. It's like, well, if Amazon and Facebook and MasterCard and the government all have similar interests, they're all going to help each other out, and it's all going to look like, well, it is a conspiracy, but it's all going to look like they're in lockstep, when really they just have the same vector. They have the same goal. And I mean, if it all became one thing, eventually they'd start eating each other as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of the intellectual cover provided by the intellectual class for government actions.
Yeah,
the progressive era, and it's like this self-reinforcing, supporting one arm of the triangle, supporting the next arm of the triangle.
Yeah, it's just like the web of blackmail associated with like Pizzagate and sexual assaults and fraternities, and the government keeps that all together, and then they're in bed with Amazon, and they're in bed with Facebook, and Facebook feeds you information, and the CIA is going into other fucking countries and bringing back drugs and putting them into fucking vulnerable communities, and then those communities are asking for stricter drug laws, and then we get the war on drugs, and then the Defense Department is approving scripts in Hollywood. Like, all of these people know each other. They go to the same country clubs, this is the nature of authority, power structures, right? So it's not hard for me to see how this is coming to fruition. It's obvious to us, looking at it, that it's not justified, but justification isn't really the issue. It's what you can do, not what's right, because these people are not interested in truth or justice or liberty. They're interested in domination and control.
Right, and we've seen that very much in the response to the pandemic. Yeah. Basically, they're doing whatever they can because they can, and they can get away with it. But let's dial this back to Heat. Let's get into any final notes before we get into summary and review, and give a score. And I'll have to fill in for Robert and myself, unless you've got any final notes on your end, Mike.
No, this is like, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. Like I said, dominance, control. Talked a lot about what the nature of authority is, and how we sort of make our own laws and our own systems. And I think it's in the title. Heat. You bring heat down on yourself with your actions. It's a very, very male film, or masculine film, or yang in the Chinese sense. Kicks ass. And so I showed this to my nephew, and his feedback was that he could not know who was going to die between the two of them until the very last moment. And that, I think, is a pretty that's a very rewarding thing, I think, for a film to be able to do that. Like, I think that's a good thing. If a film can keep you on the edge of your seat despite it being completely telegraphed, you know, like it feels like I said, Greek in its melodrama, and its level of like sort of interplay with destiny and stuff and the characters. But at the same time, it actually kept you on the edge of your seat, wanting to know what was going to happen, despite it being like a kind of an old tale, having an old feeling to it. So this is why I like Michael Mann. This is certainly his best film. It might be the best film ever made. I can't think of a better film except maybe Starship Troopers. So, and scene.
So score wise, it's a 10 out of 10. This is.
I'd be like 11 out of 10, right, or 11 out of 9.
Okay, all right. So it's above and beyond on the.
Yeah, because that was another one where money went missing, right? 9/11. Anyway.
I think you're right on that one. Well, I'm going to agree with you in a lot of respects. I think that this is well done. I am, of course, a bigger fan of Michael Mann now as a result of having watched films by him, as you know, from you being on the show. So I have a newfound appreciation for him. This is a movie I hadn't seen in a very long time. Of course, De Niro and Pacino are probably at the back end of their the height of their powers in this film. Having made a name for themselves in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, but they're still very powerful actors in this film. Mann's directing is great. I notice a lot of very strong imagery in the cinematography, where you see a lot of scenes that are bisected or cut in certain ways, or people are traversing like triangulations or triangles or directions. So there's almost like some just beautiful visualization in this film that has a bit of a dreamlike quality, especially with all the darkness that is going on as a lot of the scenes kind of happen in the night. But overall, I think it's actually well paced. It moves pretty quickly for the nearly 3-hour runtime, and there's not a whole lot of wasted scenery in this. There's not a lot of scenes that could even be cut and still maintain the narrative that's being told, the fully developed characterizations, and we get to know more about these actors or the characters that are in the movie, to where we actually care about what happens to them by the end of it, or we actually, like you were saying with your nephew, you don't know who's going to come out on top at the end, because you have these equally matched people, and you have one of them actually at an advantageous position who ends up losing. So it's a bit of an upset at the end. So I'm gonna agree that it's a really good film. I wouldn't go 11 out of 9 or anything like that, but I will go with the old black and gold on this one and leave it as a highly recommended film. I don't know if it's my favorite Michael Mann film, but it is really good. So I'm sure that Robert would say that this is the worst film of all time, and he's very unhappy with the direction it went at the end, with the big flaw at the end where De Niro needlessly expects himself to be shot, and so it ruins the whole film for him. Actually, I think he'd probably say it's pretty good. Maybe a 7.5 out of 10 for Robert. I'm just making up.
That's practically a 10. if you account for inflation or exchange
rate, yeah,
exchange rate.
So I think that's going to be our show for tonight. We're going to do some Catherine Turner Overdrive, just me and Mike C. After this, that's available for Patreon supporters, lastnighters.com/Patreon. You can find the show notes more for this at lastnighters.com/130. You can also find it on Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Also, I just want to mention that next week, we're going to be celebrating whatever remains of our independence still exist in some form or fashion. the Mel Gibson flick, The Patriot, with Snobby Bobby of the Not For Everyone podcast, which is also a movie review show. So it's a bit of a crossover episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. I listened to a couple of his recent episodes, and he and his co-host have like a morning show vibe, but with a lot of cursing and just kind of rambling nonsense, which is very entertaining. It's very conversational, so I think it'll fit in really well with us. Though we are just having Snobby Bobby on, not his co-host, but I think it'll be a really good time doing The Patriot. So that's going to be our show for tonight. Mike, if you can remind people where they can find your music, and then I hope you can stick around for a little bit longer and we do the Kathleen Turner Overdrive after this.
Yeah, I'm on SoundCloud, Mechanical Dream Revolution, and I'm just getting a website put together for my shit because I think I'm about to hit that wall of suppression. So it's all free, so I feel like I got a bit of leeway there for the whole copyright thing, but I do lean heavily on existing material, and that seems to be persecuted. Copyright strikes seem to be exercised in a biased way, in a political way. So I feel like I'm going to run into some shit. So I'm starting a website. I think it's mechanicaldreamrevolution.com. It's not up yet, so hopefully I can come back on the show and launch the new season, which is coming out. I'm trying to get it out by September, in time for this shit show of an election that we're going to have. And yeah, that's me.
All right. Well, thanks again for being a friend, Golden Girl style, and for being a multi-time guest. It's always a fun conversation with you. And with that, I'll say good night from last night, everybody. We'll see you next week. Peace out.